Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast with the deepest classic Who cut yet. Because this week we watched Survivors of the Flux.
Written by Chris Chibnall.
Directed by, Azure Salim.
And aired on November 28th, 2021.
Yeah, so we'll get to the deep classic Who cut in just a minute. It'll be real soon.
It'll be really deep, it'll be really classic Who, it'll be great.
Yeah, it'll be Chris Chibnall's greatest coup yet, so to speak.
He's committed multiple coups.
Yes. I mean, the timeless child reveal is definitely a coup in a way. A coup of overwriting the 50 years of Doctor Who history. Not overwriting, sorry. Retconning / expanding upon 50 years of Doctor Who history. And he's done that multiple times, but anyway.
Yeah, but I think before we get to that, what we kind of wanted to go over was just a massive, I think, ego boost for ourselves. Just a section where we pat ourselves on the back for about, a couple minutes here.
Well, for some context, every year Spotify releases this thing called the Spotify Wrapped, and most people know about their personal Wrapped. As a listener, it tells you like your most listened to song, your most listened to artists, etc. But what some people may not know is on the podcasting back end, because our podcasts are on Spotify, they give you a Spotify for Podcasters Wrapped, which instead of telling you what you listen to, tells you how many people and who listen to your podcast. So, we cracked it open today. Trust Your Doctor. What's the Trust Your Doctor Wrapped look like? Well, here's what it looks like. We released our first episode on January 3rd. It was Revolution of the Daleks. Man, we had an insane turnaround on that episode, now that I think about it.
That we did. That was one of our lengthiest episodes of Trust Your Doctor.
Yeah, it was actually, because it was the very first episode we watched live, basically.
Yep.
I remember watching it on my crappy cable connection. So the picture was all distorted and really bad, and it was interrupted with BBC America's ads. It was a bad experience. Apparently, the number of people who follow us on Spotify went up by 45% in 2021. So, hey, welcome to all the new people who listen to us.
Hell yeah, Zenith still bringing in those listeners 3 years down the line. Check out Zenith. Our Blake 7 podcast is somehow still doing better than our other podcasts, even though it's over.
So the addendum to this Wrapped was going to be that more people listen to Zenith on Spotify than Trust Your Doctor in 2021. But anyway, there were 19 people out there. Shout out to these 19 people who listen to Trust Your Doctor more than any other podcast on Spotify. Hell yeah.
Well, I think we usually save our comments via email and social media for the end, but I think it's an opportune time here to mention it because I think Justin Mitchell, can't speak, aka @JustinDoesArt on Twitter, is probably one of them. So, Justin posted his Spotify Wrapped. We were number 1 on that, which I was really, I was just really glad to see it. It's like, it makes it all feel worthwhile. Thank you, Justin, for having us as number 1 on there. Really glad you, and more importantly than just being number 1, who cares about rankings and stuff like that? Like, just really glad you're enjoying the show out there. So.
Yeah, really glad that everybody's enjoying the show and all 1,876 minutes of content we've released for Trust Your Doctor alone in 2021. Which also makes me realize we underestimated the amount of content we released because we released about 1,200 minutes for Inevitable in 2021, which comes to about 3,000 minutes, which comes to about 50 hours of content, which means there's out there basically 2 2 full days of your life worth of audio content recorded by Keon and I in 2021 alone.
Right. And, Dylan and I were talking about this right before we started recording, but I guess I'll just admit this. I don't really care, but at the same time, it's weird. Is like, now that I work fully online, I don't talk outside of this podcast. Like, most days go by and I don't utter even a single word. I talk like basically once a week, which is when we record.
Well, at the moment, due to bad planning on our part, mostly you're talking twice a week.
Right, yeah.
So, oops.
It's fine. It'll go back to being once pretty soon. Flux is almost over.
So is
Firefly on Inevitable.
And this 50 hours of content thing, neglects to consider, first off, a whole season of Triple Play we released and recorded this year, plus an additional secret season of Triple Play that we've recorded this year but is yet to be released.
Yeah, it's going to be released like a year and a half after it was recorded.
When everything will be extremely topical. Every single joke we make in it, which will have been topical when we made it, will be completely relevant still when it gets released.
Yeah, thanks to wait, what's the new strain called? Omicron, right? Sounds like a transformer. It sounds like one of the Decepticons or something.
Transformers, Omicron in disguise. Anyway, that's Spotify Wrapped for Trust Your Doctor. Thank you to everybody who listened in. Thanks to everybody who listened to us drone on about Doctor Who for God knows how long this year.
Well, for 1,800, whatever it was, whatever the number
was. For 1,800 minutes. And hope you all stick around till the end of the year. Hope you all stick around next year. We've got some big plans for 2021. We've got some big plans, let me tell you.
Okay, are you going to tell us?
I can sense Keon sitting there going, "Wait, what big plans?"
You did say let me tell you. So are you going to reveal what these big plans are? I'm just as much in the dark as the audience is here to what these big plans could be.
Yeah. The big plans are 2022 is going to be a great year for over here at Decorative Vegetable Towers. I don't know why in all of these imaginary scenarios I portray us as having like towers, multiple decorative vegetable towers. Paradise Towers would have been a way more interesting episode if it was set in decorative vegetable towers. I do record these episodes from the 4th floor of the building I live in because that's the floor that my bedroom's on.
And hey, if nothing else, the one thing tying us, I think, to Paradise Towers is the cannibalism. So there is that,
Keon's views are his own and do not represent those of the podcast. Man, Keon, you've been slacking. It's been like 30 episodes since I've had to say that.
Yeah, what was once maybe a weekly occurrence has now dwindled down. I feel like a former punk rock band member or something like that, well into their 30s or something. Not that I'm in my 30s, but, somebody once told me.
Somebody once told me that the Doctor was actually not Shebogan. Honestly, we're about to get into the episode, and there's going to be a lot of timeless child talk on this episode, so I might as well start us off right now by saying that, everybody's all up in arms about, Chris Chibnall introducing Division and introducing the timeless child and, like, making the Doctor some sort of special figure, but, like, everybody neglects to mention just how absurd. They neglect to mention the secret retcon that Chris Chibnall wrote into the timeless child, which is that the native species to Gallifrey are not Gallifreyans, they're Shobogans, and how just completely absurd that name is.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if there's one thing that I, an admitted and devoted lover of the Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker era, will say, it's that Chris Chibnall has sort of a piss poor, you might say, naming sense. You got Shobogans, you got Tecteun.
Ossock. I like Carvanista, actually, but the Kasavan, Simshaw.
Ossock, it's almost self-aware of the fact, considering they never actually say the name Ossock in this episode or the last one. It's simply in the credits. It's never spoken aloud.
And I actually think in, wow, what is that episode called? Episode 3? What was it called?
3? That's too far back for me.
Before Village of the Angels. Once Upon Time. In Once Upon Time, the subtitles don't even identify her as Ossock, if I remember correctly. They do in this episode, but the closed captioning does identify her as Ossock.
Yeah, the credits in Once Upon Time did call her Ossock. I remember that because that's when we were doing our sort of little detective game around her.
Yeah, we went back in time. Well, we just rewound the tape. We rewound the video. The tape, what is this, 1992?
Yeah, do like, does Gen Z even say rewind? Like, that's such a thing of its era, where it's you're literally rewinding a tape around a reel.
Yeah, for shizzle, rewind that tape deck, my dude. That's pretty sick, bro. You've got some sick moves.
It's pretty wizard.
That's pretty wizard, man. I'm just trying to drop all the 90s lingo I can think
I know,
of.
yeah, we're not even like 90s kids or people, really.
Yeah,
we were born
like
in the 90s.
3 at the end of the 90s. Okay, anyway, so the episode opens with the greatest classic Who reference of all time. That is resolving the cliffhanger in the first 5 seconds of the episode.
Right. So the Doctor is, as she was at the end of Village of the Angels, trapped in an angel form, of herself. Mm-hmm. In the first 2 seconds of this episode, she not thaws,
wakes
but
up,
she
basically
breaks out of the form. And she is in sort of a mindscape of angels.
Yeah. Kind of a weird scene in hindsight. Kind of doesn't really fit with the rest of the episode in hindsight.
Yeah, this episode, I think, let's just preempt this by saying, was probably the most confusing of Doctor Who Flux so far. But you can break it down and compartmentalize it into 3 main running plot lines, which those are the Doctor and Tecteun, who we don't know is Tecteun yet, but will shortly.
Yeah, spoilers.
Right, the Grand Serpent infiltrating unit, and Yaz and Dan and Eustachius trying to
get back to present day.
Right.
Or even not even just get back to present day, just to get out of 1903.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So obviously we start, and surprisingly, I think actually, like on the topic of what you were just talking about, I actually feel like the Doctor parts of the episode make up less of the episode than I would expect. They're the least focused on plot thread of the 3.
Yeah, I think that's true. Obviously, we didn't go minute by minute and measure, but I would assume, just kind of based on my memory of the episode, having watched it 2 days ago, that is the case, that the Doctor's story makes up is sort of the least lengthy of the three that we just mentioned.
Yeah, perhaps we should mention as normal. We're recording this on Wednesday, December 1st. We watched this episode on November 29th.
Yep. A day after it came out, as we usually do. As we always do, actually.
Right. So the doctor has a little discussion with some of the angels, and she's like, yo, what is going on? And they're like, we trapped you as an angel because we thought it was funny. And she's like, what?
It's just a prank, bro.
And so they're like, we're transporting you. And she's like, but to where? And they're like, too many questions. We're locking you up as an angel again. Freaking sucks to be you, doctor.
And the doctor, like, in this scene, she steps up to an angel, sort of gets all up in its face and, is like, say something, why don't you? Or something along those lines. And I'm like, the angels have never talked before. What do you expect? Oh, they do here, actually, so maybe she is in the right.
They talked in Village of the Angels too, but only the one inside of Claire's mind, and it was talking through Claire.
Meanwhile, in 1904...
Yeah, in Mexico in 1904. As Keon said about halfway through this episode, nice to see they're still using impact font.
Right, and it's sort of...
For all of this.
Yeah, they do it the same way that they were in series... I think 11 they were using it as far back as series 11. It's like, it's in the scene, It's like, it's not... I don't even know how to describe it. It's not like...
Yeah, it's not overlaid over it's not overlaid over the shot. They incorporate it into the shot.
I know. Imagine if, like, in the next episode, they have a similar thing, but like someone picks up one of the numbers or something like that, and is like, "What's this?"
God.
What's this thing doing here? And not only that, but they make it integral to how they stop Tectayun and the Flux and Division.
So the gang, mostly led by Yaz, the most doctorish of the three.
WWTTTD.
Yeah, what would the doctor do? We all thought that was just a throwaway joke, and now here we are, 2 episodes later, having it become like a major part of the episode. She's leading them to a pot. We don't particularly know why she's doing this. We find out later.
It's because Indiana Jones doesn't exist yet, so they're really capitalizing on the burgeoning film market to make millions.
No. There's a fun little... John Bishop posted a fun little short 30-second behind-the-scene clip of him falling down the hole, in the episode, he's falling down attached to a rope, obviously, because him and Jericho can't figure out how the damn pulley works. But he posted a little behind the scenes, which is like him falling down attached to like a harness, and just like how they filmed that behind the scenes. It's just a short little 30-second thing. It's kind of neat. I liked it because it kind of, I don't know. I like seeing the actors playing these characters having fun with the role.
Yeah,
I'll link it in the
if
show
there's
notes.
one thing John Bishop does look like he's doing, I guess, just from the limited things I've seen from him over the past couple weeks, looks like he had at least had fun playing Dan.
Yeah, I mean, how can you not? Dan is great.
He's all right.
I really like
He's
Dan.
okay.
Really like Dan. I liked him to begin with. I kind of wasn't so sold on him, maybe kind of in the middle, but now I'm starting to like him a lot again.
Yeah, I don't really care about him. I mean, I don't know. I have no strong feelings.
That's right, because your favorite character is Eustachius Jericho. It's okay.
Yeah, I do like Jericho more than Dan, actually, or I think he's at least more interesting.
So we cut to now the Doctor, who meets an Ood, getting that Russell T representation in this story.
Yep. It has one of those brain device things, so it's not actually its brain.
Yeah, it's got one of those translator orbs. And we meet the woman, the myth, the legend, Ossock.
John Cena. Okay, no.
God, it would be so insane if John Cena had like a guest role on Doctor Who. Can you imagine just how insane that would be?
He guest starred in Fred 2, which we have watched.
And 3. And 3. And 1. He had a recurring role in those movies in a way.
Was he in 1? I forgot about that.
He was in all 3 of them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the fridge in 1.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Imagine if John Cena guested on Doctor Who and they made him play something like Barusa or something.
Yeah.
If we show ran this show, the show would either be the greatest it's ever been, or we would run it into the ground in 6 episodes.
I mean, let's just recap our ideas that just in this episode alone, incorporating the incorporating the date cards into the episode and having to be an integral part of how they solve the problem, and using John Cena as a guest star. Those are two suggestions. We've past 10 minutes alone.
Here we go. Let me pitch something to you, Keon. Let me blow your mind. We've already said, what if we had The Rock as the Doctor? Here we go. The Rock as the Doctor. John Cena as the Master. Mm-hmm. Boom. Instant money maker.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, yep. Well, actually, you know what? I might honestly be better to pit The Rock and Vin Diesel against each other, since they have that sort of weird semi-beef in real life.
That beef got like 3 layers deeper recently when Vin tweeted and was like, hey, Dwayne, we're making one more Fast and the Furious movie. F10, we really want you on board. Let's put our differences aside and let's make this movie. He tweeted this publicly, and he attached an image of him and The Rock in, I don't know, Fast 5. I haven't seen any of them except number 8. But somebody in the comments was like, man, why did you edit this picture so that you were bigger, Vin? And then showed the original picture where Vin Diesel is and Diesel's 3 to 5 inches shorter than what he looks like in the version he posted.
Okay, while that is pretty funny, it's I almost feel like the weird beef between them is almost like a marketing ploy at this point. I mean, it probably didn't start that way, but it kind of feels that way now.
I don't even know anymore.
The funniest part about it probably still is that The Rock doesn't really seem to care.
Yeah, he just keeps on living his life.
Anyway, where the hell were we in the episode?
So Ossock basically meets the Doctor, and the Doctor's like, what is this? And Ossock is like, this is Division, Doctor. And she's like, what? She's like, I'm the head of Division, okay? And I had a thought in this moment. Last time we saw Ossock was in Once Upon a Time when the Maury flung the Doctor ahead in her time stream to meet Ossock briefly. And in that scene, Ossock / Tecteun, I'm just going to call her Ossock for now because she hasn't been revealed yet, is like, don't search for this place, Doctor. You're never going to find it, and it's not going to be worth it. And then in this episode, Ossock says something like, didn't I tell you, not to come looking for me? And I'm like, the Doctor actually didn't come looking for you. And it's been literally 2 hours since she saw you in Once Upon a Time. I know these episodes have a pretty rapid pace and a lot of editing, and, everything feels real quick. But, lest we forget that the Doctor travels from Once Upon a Time, drops Vinder off on his home planet, and then the TARDIS immediately gets hijacked by a weeping angel who drops her off in a village where the Doctor tries to escape and gets captured by the angels. At no point in those 24 hours at most, it's more like 3 hours, did the Doctor actually go, you know what, I'm going to go find Ossock. She says to Yaz, I'm going to find Ossock, but she doesn't make an effort to do that because they get hijacked by the angels immediately after.
Yeah, it honestly may have, I don't know, behooved the story or something, or made for a more interesting mid-season break if somehow they all just went home after Once Upon Time or something like that, or like there was a bigger time gap or something like that. You know, like the Doctor was looking for Ossock or something, or the characters were off.
Yeah, because as it stands, and we were thinking about this too while we were watching this episode. Like Dan and Jericho, but more so Dan, an actual companion of the Doctor, has spent, I don't know, 15 minutes with the Doctor and then has to spend 3 damn years stuck in the 1900s for it.
He seems to be taking this in stride, though. I mean, his life has literally been derailed. It's not only been derailed, it's been flung off a cliff. He's just taking it in stride.
Yeah. He's just... That's why I like Dan, because... maybe this is selfish. I don't know, but I really aspire to be like that, to just be able to just take life in stride and not worry about it too much. And Dan is like the ultimate of every Doctor Who companion that's ever been introduced. Dan is the ultimate, like, this is happening and I'm just gonna go along with it kind of guy.
Well, there was also Nyssa, whose entire world was destroyed. Before she, her father died at least, but...
Yeah, but she had some angst about that, There was some, like, discussions about that. Dan has just been like, YOLO.
Yeah, true.
Dan got... The first thing that happened to Dan on this show was that he got kidnapped by an alien dog, and he just went, whatever, man.
Well, anyway, back to the scene with the Doctor and Tecteun. One thing we should mention is that the set that this is all taking place in, 1, looks very interesting. 2, is definitely designed to evoke a TARDIS.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be. It's like there's a tree in the middle of the room, kind of where the console would be, and this tree is connected to all of this, like, technology. My immediate first thought was, how do you even say it? Like, Yggdrasil, the life tree.
Yeah, Yggdrasil.
Yggdrasil, yeah, in like, Norse mythology, or Norse cosmology, really, is like the tree that holds the universe together, basically. That's a very, very simplified version of events. You should go check it out more in depth if you're interested in that. But, like, this immediately made me think of that when this came up on screen. Especially with how Ossock, as we find out the next time she appears in the episode, that she's using this station based around this tree to, like, destroy the universe.
Yeah, and it's it's sort of like it's towering above everything, and it's sort of reaching up towards, well, the top of the set, but like reaching up towards the heavens or something like that. So
yeah. So this is
yeah. Anyway, Yaz, Dan, and Eustachius find themselves on a ship. They only got a room for 2, though, or Dan is he's a stowaway, so. He when someone comes into the room to
this is I was just checking my notes. Sorry, this is actually like we have a scene before we see them on this ship, because we see them go to the bazaar where the explosion is before they get on the ship.
Right. There's an actual Indiana Jones-esque scene, reminiscent of the fridge escapade from the most recent Indiana Jones movie, which is now like over 10 years old, where. What even was this? Someone tries to blow them to smithereens with dynamite, and they just kind of muffle the explosion with a jacket or something like that.
Yeah, Yaz just starts like... This is a little bit of like a hilarious scene, because it's 1904, so the bomb is like, it's lit by a physical fuse, and Yaz's solution, instead of just, I don't know, putting the fuse out, is to like cover the bomb in carpets and then run away.
To be honest, I didn't notice this until now, but both this scene and the next one for this group, the Yaz, Dan, Eustachius group, like literally have Looney Tunes gags in them. Like dynamite, putting it out with, I guess, something dumb or unrealistic, like jacket or something like that. Mm-hmm. In the next scene, Eustachius literally goes 1 lump or 2, and he hits him over the head with a pan or something. I forget if it was a pan. But this is too there's too many examples here. There's one too many examples here for me to not raise an eyebrow at this.
I mean, I don't know. There's like, Chris Chibnall has to get these people from. Chris Chibnall has to get these people from 1904 to meet up with the Doctor by the end of the next episode, so I can forgive him for there being some, shall we say, creative liberties in how they get there.
Yeah, no, I don't forgive him because I don't dislike it. I actually think it's a good addition to the episode. It's almost like, I don't know, like Thomas Pynchon or something, where he's writing something, I don't know. Doctor Who isn't, Pynchon-esque or anything like that, but it's like, Thomas Pynchon was famous for like loving cartoons and like more lowbrow entertainment than like what he produced.
I mean, this season does feel almost. I haven't read all of Gravity's Rainbow. In fact, I've only read the first 4 chapters before I went, okay, I'm going to need to dedicate more time to this than I have right now. But this whole season feels very much like my experience with that book, which is that there are 6 jillion plot threads going on, and you're like not really sure which one's the main one while you're watching everything.
Yeah, but there's a sense that it's going to be resolved.
Yeah, which is not true for Gravity's Rainbow.
No. And most, if not all, of Pynchon's body of work is like that, where there's no sense that it's ever going to be, never going to be sat down and explained anything. And I've only read one of his books, and that's 100% true for the one I have read.
So anyway, in this bizarre scene where they're getting the pot read by someone who's an expert in it, it doesn't matter who exactly, but they just say that they learn the date that the world's going to end, which is December 5th, which, wow, what a coincidence. That's the date the next episode airs.
Mm-hmm.
The person who sets this bomb has a snake tattoo on their wrist, which dovetails nicely into the next scene, which is 1958, England, where we see Prentice, or the Grand Serpent, going by the name Prentice, shooting pigeons with a guy. And the guy's like, so, what do you do, Prentice? And he's like, well, I deal with aliens. And the guy's like, wow, what a coincidence. I'm founding this new task force unit. Do you want to be a part of it?
I think the Grand Serpent turns to him and he's like, you don't know what you're getting yourself into, buddy, or something to that effect.
Yeah, the guy's like, well, with your help, we'll know. And Prentice is like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
And I have a note here. This was a joke I made when we were watching it, but I have it as a note that this guy's the biggest security leak since Yates.
Yeah, and just repeating what I actually said in response to that, he predates Yates.
Given the events of this episode, which I want to talk about the Grand Serpent's whole insertion into the unit timeline when we get to the end, but if we run with the idea just for a moment that the Grand Serpent was there the whole time during Unit's era, like what must he have been thinking when Yates just sold them out for a completely different alien, just sold Earth out to someone else.
Imagine if in the next episode, we actually do see Benton and Yates reappear, obviously played by different actors, but we do see them reappear, and Benton, it's never focused upon, but Benton maybe leans over and his sleeve kind of gets pulled up a little bit and you just see a snake tattoo on his wrist. It
would make more sense if Yates leaned over and was
I know, and that's why it has to be Benton, because you would expect it to be Yates.
Jeez. I think Richard Franklin and John Levine are both still alive. They could both make a cameo. That would actually be Chris Chibnall's greatest coup, is if in next episode Kate Stewart, we already know Kate Stewart's going to be in the next episode as the head of human resistance against the Sontarans. If she just drops into the episode and she meets, I don't know, Dan, and she's like, I'm going to need to call in some favors from some old friends.
I know, she told us she was calling in a favor.
The door opens, and there stand Benton and Yates, and they go, hello, Kate. In fact, what if that's the cliffhanger to the next episode?
Yeah, it just ends with the revelation that the specials will follow Benton and Yates, that the show is focusing focusing away from the Doctor and onto them. After 60 years, it's time for a bit of a change.
Well, so now we get the ship scene you were mentioning earlier with, this Looney Tunes scene where a guy shows up to, like, kill them and he has a snake tattoo on his arm. This is actually the first time that Yaz, Dan, and Jericho become aware of the snake tattoo on their assailant's arms. That they actually didn't see who planted the bomb in the previous episode. We did as the audience, though.
Mm-hmm.
And we discovered that the reason why they looked for this pot, why they had it decoded, and why they were looking for the date that the world is going to end, which is December 5th, but they don't know the year, although I think 2021 would be a pretty good guess given all the information they have at hand, is because the Doctor left a hologram for Yaz that she recorded at some point between, I guess, Once Upon a Time and Village of the Angels, probably when they were dropping off Vinda. It's interesting to me, and I noted this, but I don't think there's anything deeper to this, that both the Doctor and Bell left very similar holograms for people. Bell left that hologram at the end of the last episode for Vinda to find. The Doctor put this hologram into Yaz's pocket for Yaz to find.
If anything, it just sort of, I can't believe I'm mentioning this, but, like, you know that there's a large amount of, like, Yaz Doctor fan shipping things out there, right? Yeah.
Yes, I'm aware. Didn't I can't believe I'm about to admit this on air, and maybe I'm going to cut this out. But didn't I tell you about the Yaz Doctor / fic, where, like,
yeah, we talked. I think we talked about this, and I think you didn't cut it out of the episode when we did.
Yeah, but I don't think I linked it in the show notes either.
You don't have to this time either.
But yeah, anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
It also plays into a surprisingly large subsect of fandom who think that Bell and Vinda are going to be revealed to be the Doctor's parents.
Yeah, I don't fall into that camp whatsoever.
Yeah, neither do I.
Yeah. I think we get some more with Ossock at this point.
Yeah, we do, based on my notes.
This is actually when she reveals that she's the leader of Division, and what Division is, I believe.
Yeah, she basically explains that Division started on Gallifrey's, like, a cabal, I guess. She doesn't use that word, but I'm going to, of secret agents who traveled through time, changing people's fates, basically, and that it spread out from Gallifrey and enlisted other races. The Doctor has a very strong opposition to using Weeping Angels as Division agents.
Yeah, no, this actually isn't mentioned in the episode, but, if you remember back to pretty much anything in the past, the Time Lords have supposedly always had this sort of strong non-intervention policy with the rest of the universe. They at some point had decided to go hands off. They never really actually followed through with that, but that was the idea.
Yeah, and
that was the idea. And Division is obviously a covert organization that Ossock now reveals they really weren't like that. They had this sort of organization that was going against their openly expressed beliefs.
The Doctor does reference it by saying that the existence of Division is in contravention to all Time Lord directives.
Oh, yeah, true.
But that also, like, that non-intervention policy was actually a surprisingly major theme in the classic show, because the Fourth Doctor in the Invasion of Time was recalled to Gallifrey, and they're like, yeah, we don't interfere, and now the Sontarans are invading us, and the Doctor's like, what do you want me to do about it? Plus, it's also the basis for the entire Trial of a Time Lord arc, where they're like, you've been interfering with people for, like, hundreds of years, Doctor, and he's like, yeah, so what? It's not like you guys are doing anything about it.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that, like, that was brought up in the Invasion of Time when the Sontarans were invading. In this story, overall, the Sontarans are, we now realize, a more major part of the story than we even thought.
It's also fascinating, and I'm coming up with this on the fly, so forgive me if I stumble a little bit, but it's fascinating to me that so much of the classic show, and a lot of this is like people saying that Chibnall is undoing the classic show. And in a way, this is interesting because he's drawing a kind of parallel. Because in the classic show, the Doctor was against Time Lord society because he's like, we shouldn't be non-interventionists. We should save the people who need to be saved. You know, in Meglos, that one guy has a line that the Doctor sees the threads of the universe and mends them when they break. And the Doctor, when he starts coming into contact with the Time Lords more often in the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh Doctor era, he's like constantly at odds with them because he thinks we should interfere and we should save these people. And here in this episode, the Division has been doing this the whole time, and the Doctor now is put in the position of having to be against that because what the Division was doing was that they were interfering, but they were like doing it. They weren't doing it to better people's lives. They were just doing it as an experiment. And now the Doctor has to like, not only does the Doctor have to condemn this action, she has to self-justify why her own intervention is justified.
Yep. Yeah, that makes total sense. What you just said. Yeah, it makes total sense. It actually makes this episode make more sense.
Well, I'm glad.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually puts everything into perspective for me, at least.
Huh. Well, that's good because I was literally coming up with it on the fly. So.
Yeah, it makes sense overall. It's like, the conflict here is really a more I don't know, abstract one between the Doctor and kind of what her past justifying it and stuff like that. Done in a more interesting way than maybe previous dilemmas for the Doctor, where it was often like, "You're just like me, Doctor," like the villain would come out and say something along those lines. Where in this case, it actually feels. I know I keep saying this, but it actually feels like it has some more weight based on everything you just said. Where the Doctor really has to, I guess, justify why she is in the right for doing what she did when Division is so clearly in the wrong.
Yeah, and that actually comes into play in the next Ossock scene where, Ossock tries to justify everything, and how the Doctor's morality has always been a weakness, and she has to be like, well, morality is a strength, and like morality is what makes me who I am, basically.
True. Well, anyway, another thing that Ossock reveals here is what the Flux was like for, I guess. Which is that...
Yeah, it's to wipe out the universe.
Yeah, so on top... it almost seems overloaded now that I kind of think back to it, but it's like on top of the Division stuff, there's also this other thing where the Division destroys universes. Basically, they unleashed the Flux in order to end the current universe while they transfer sort of an arc of... Ossock calls it a seed bank, I believe, into the next universe.
Yeah, I think the Doctor is actually the one who calls it the seed
bank.
Oh,
really?
But yeah.
Imagine if it was like a crinoid seed bank. But this is where you get the shot that the TARDIS wiki I'm just looking now is using as their picture for the episode, and it's probably the most striking shot of the episode of like...
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful shot.
Yeah, so it's like, it's this station that they are on, which I believe is our first glimpse at where exactly they are. They're on this sort of space station, and it looks like it's transitioning from one universe that looks like it's, old and dying to a new, cleaner one.
Yeah.
I'll put a link to it in the show notes because it's on the TARDIS wiki, so I'll just link to that.
Right. So this is really playing into this multiverse theory. Doctor Who has dealt with the multiverse actually many times before, so this is not... A lot of people think that Chibnall's like going all in on this like MCU-esque multiverse, but I guess forget that the Doctor Who has dealt with the multiverse all the way back to, if you remember, Inferno. If you remember in Inferno, the Doctor's attempt to get the TARDIS working accidentally shunted him into a parallel timeline universe where England had become fascist and the Brigadier was part of a fascist unit analog in that universe.
Yeah, and of course there was the Land of Fiction as well. I know that's not really on the same level, but still.
There was also like Pete's World, where when the Doctor and Rose accidentally ended up in Pete's World, where the Cybermen were created by some guy trying to improve human life in present-day England, and Rose ended up in that universe at the end of her run.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, in The Doctor's Wife, it's not another universe, but the planet, that living planet that tries to steal the TARDIS exists in the space between universes outside the regular universe.
Yep. It's been done many times before. There's probably other ones too that we're not even remembering. The thing is, this doesn't lend credence to the theory that a lot of people have had and that I've subscribed to as well, which is that the 13th Doctor and the Fugitive Doctor are alternate versions of the Doctor from different universes.
Yeah, that they're perhaps the same incarnation but in different timelines. What would be really interesting, and what would be an interesting kind of way to reconcile the timeless child with everything, would be to explain that the timeless child is just like, what I'm imagining is, and I was going to talk about this at the end of the episode, but I guess it's relevant to the discussion now because you brought up this theory. What I'm imagining is, at the end of all of this, at the end of Chibnall's run, he somehow paints this as like a possible explanation for the Doctor. And, you know, in much the same way, this is a weird reference to make, but I don't know if people know the Batman comic, The Killing Joke, which
I think they do.
Posits the
Even I do.
Posits the origin of the Joker, yeah. But then in later incarnations, the Joker basically refers to that origin as being only one of many possible explanations for how he came to be. And it's possible, I think, for Chibnall setting up the multiverse for basically to set up this timeless child explanation as like, that is the origin of a Doctor, but maybe not necessarily the one in this universe. We may not know for sure, kind of thing. You know, how the Doctor's past is multiple choice, and this whole thing is the origin of a Doctor, but whether or not it's this Doctor will be left up to question at the end. That's something I was thinking about yesterday.
It's honestly disappointing to think that all of this stuff, which I find really interesting, kind of compelling and stuff like that, is probably going to be thrown away in the next iteration of Doctor Who with Russell T Davies back at the helm. Maybe not, but I think it's likely. Very Pete Lambert, who's sort of, I would call him a friend of the show. And sort of,
I call him a friend of the show.
Definitely a friend on Twitter, follower on Twitter and stuff like that, and a mutual on that site as well. That's how you really date people, actually, is whether they call social media a site or an app. But that's besides the point. He tweeted, I saw this, I didn't interact with it, but whatever, I guess I'm just voicing my thoughts on it here. But he said, like, I really hope the next showrunner of Doctor Who is more interested in the future of the show than in the past. And yeah, I don't know, I felt it was a little, well, one on the nose, but two, like, I don't know, I don't see this era in that way. Because even with all the Classic Who throwbacks and references, and there are a lot, I mean, we've been going over, like, a lot of them, it's like, there's all this, like, there's so much possibility with kind of the things that Chibnall and the other writers, too, are throwing in here. And there's honestly a lot more like more like stakes or narrative tension or something like that, because information is not being given freely. It's sort of being drip fed in a way. Where it's like the Fugitive Doctor first appeared well over a year ago. We don't really know who she is yet. Almost 2 years ago, in fact.
Yeah, Chibnall has done a really good job of drip feeding us information, and you know, even in this episode, we have, now I think, I know that you didn't necessarily ascribe to the theory that this was planned from the beginning, but we do later get a scene of the Grand Serpent cutting funding to UNIT in 2017, you know, and then there was that special that year where, like, the Doctor calls UNIT and they're defunded, they don't exist anymore. And, like, I think that was planned. I think he planned to have an explanation for that from the beginning. Whether or not it was the Grand Serpent, sure, maybe we don't know. But I think it might have been, because lest we forget that before that special even happened, in Chibnall's second episode was the first time the Timeless Child is mentioned. Episode 2, The Ghost Monument.
Yeah, was that when the ghosts kind of look into the you're referencing that scene where they look into the Doctor's like mind or whatever and see like some evil ancient darkness or something? Yeah. So, and just to be clear, like, I honestly don't think it matters whether or not, they knew it was going to be the Grand Serpent, infiltrating unit and stuff like that. It's just the fact that Chibnall himself and, just the fiction of it in general is kind of reaching back and sort of looking at these different things of like, okay, unit was defunded. Well, why was that the case? What is sort of going on behind the scenes here type thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's more like he knew that coming into the story that the Grand Serpent was going to infiltrate UNIT. To what end, we still don't know, 5 episodes in. And I think he realized by doing that he had an explanation convenient there for why UNIT didn't exist in 2017. Because I am also kind of the opinion that Chibnall had no reason as a writer to include that line in Resolution where the Doctor calls UNIT. The Doctor has had present day Earth stories where she doesn't enlist the help of UNIT before. And in my opinion, by explicitly including that line, I kind of imagine he must have had something in mind for that. But
yeah, I mean, beats me. There just is no way to know, and it's like, I mean, I'd say this a million times per minute, but like, I don't never have it and never will care about intentionality. So there you go. That's I guess that's just my take.
Yeah, but like, I'm not looking at this in a like, this is what the story means, or like, I just want to know if Chibnall had this plan writing wise from that far back. I'm not using that to analyze the story or analyzing his intention in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I'm also kind of on the side of the fence that you don't necessarily have to, or maybe shouldn't, consider the author's intentionality when analyzing the story. But I'm looking at it from a production perspective. So from that perspective, I care. Like, why did he put that in there?
Yeah, and I mean, kind of like we said before, we never will. We just never will know.
Yeah, we never will. So anyway, the next scene we get is actually with Belle. Now, I wasn't clear in the previous episodes, although I suspected that Belle is in 2021, and this episode confirms that.
She's after the Flux.
She is searching for
was
Vinda.
Stated before. So.
Yeah. Well, so this is actually, this is something that this episode made clear for me that I wasn't clear on before. Because I knew Belle was always after the Flux, but I never knew how long. And there's also like the idea that the Flux might still be happening. So the way I think I figured it out is that there was a Flux event, destroyed most of the universe, and now Osok is generating like a second Flux event that's going to actually fully destroy Earth this time, because the first Flux event was stopped at Earth by the Doctor and the Luparians. I guess I was never clear like how long after the Flux was Belle. Like at first I thought Belle was like a glimpse into like far future post-Flux life. But instead it's minutes after the Flux. Anyway, she's looking for Vinda, but she's stolen a Luparian ship, which we already knew from Village of the Angels, and a random Luparian ship breaks formation, which I kind of think is like a Chekhov's gun. They're setting that up for something next week. So they summon Belle's ship to complete the formation once again. And she gets warped out right as Vinda arrives at the exact same planet she was going to, where Vinda discovers Swarm and Azure doing some sort of evil plan, vaporizing tons of people.
Yeah, well, they have people surrounding these glowing obelisks, and they're mesmerized, they're fixated on these obelisks, and they're motionless and they're speechless, and the way you actually see it is done like in a really like kind of funny way, where it's like you kind of just see Swarm and Azure in the background. Like the shot focused on them. I think it's just like Vinder walking by and they're just there in the background. And then they use one of the passenger forms to take in some of the people, I guess, and kill them.
Yeah, and they end up putting Vinda into one of the passengers, and Vinda meets Diane. This is all we get of Vinda in this episode. Just kind of setting him up, meeting Diane inside the passenger. And he says he has a plan, so I kind of suspect his plan all along was to get put into the passenger. Because he also says they're
Yeah,
like,
you would hope so.
well, because
right?
he also says when they detect him, they're like, "Did you think we wouldn't detect you?" And he's like, "No, I knew you would."
Yeah, I've got to say, whenever Diane is on screen, I just can't help but look at her arm. Like, I just can't help it.
Well, brave of you to admit
Yeah.
that on the podcast.
I guess. Yeah, I guess that maybe is a sort of an offensive thing or something like that. And I don't think it's really that offensive, but maybe a little bit. It's like I don't know.
Well, during all this, we get a scene in 1967 unit, and we get a little, Chris Chibnall also dropping another huge classic reference here by just completely mucking up the unit dating controversy even further by having.
I know people really cared about this on the internet at large. They were up in arms and still actually are. So God, it's only been 3 days. People are up in arms about this unit nonsense.
Yeah, having Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart have an off-screen cameo in 1967 unit as a corporal, and people are like having conniptions over how this fits into like what we already know about Lethbridge Stewart and the unit timeline, and like how they thought that Lethbridge Stewart founded unit, and I'm just like, who cares? Who cares?
There are temper tantrums being thrown as we record by grown adults over this controversy.
We already knew that like unit. This is just like, you just have to accept with unit that like the dates are going to be kind of messy. We already know at this point that like some of the unit stories in the classic show alone, like date-wise, don't line up with each other. And this is, Chibnall has demonstrated, and I think we mentioned this last week, and we mentioned this while we were watching the episode, his like villain origin story of Pip and Jane Baker never watching Doctor Who. I think Chris Chibnall has watched the show. I think Chris Chibnall is aware of things like the unit dating controversy, and I don't know if I want to make the statement, but I'm going to say it anyway. Like I almost think this is Chris Chibnall just being like,
being a troll.
Yeah, unit dating controversy. Watch this.
Oh, you wanted me to resolve the unit dating controversy? Well, hold on to your pants.
I don't want to say that's actually what he did, but like, I think it would be funny if that was what he did when he wrote this.
And we were joking, I think, right after we watched the episode of like Chris Chibnall's like, he has that. I'll put a link to it again in the show notes. We've linked to it a ton, but like he has that time when he appeared on TV, I think as a teenager back in the 80s, and he railed into Pip and Jane Baker for not having watched Doctor Who before they wrote for the show. And it's just like, it almost like Flux through that lens is such a funny season, because it's like, this is him just kind of proving. I'm not actually saying that this is true, but it's like, it would be funny, right, if this was him being like, yeah, I watched the show, guys. Like, look, I can throw in all these references and to classic Who and all the villains and all this stuff. And yeah. He just appears at the end on screen. He's like, I told you, you better watch the show before you write for it.
The end of Flux is a scene of Chris Chibnall sitting in his office going, yeah, you know what? Turning off a VHS of like Terror of the Vervoids, leaning back in his chair and going, I can do better than that. That'd be the most arrogant thing he could do.
Yeah, it would also mean that he still holds on to this memory of him being, sort of a very mean-spirited on national, maybe not national, I don't know, whatever, television. As much as some of the fans do, as much as we clearly do. Whatever, we don't have to dwell on this anymore.
While this is all going on, Yazdan and Jericho climb a mountain and meet this, I don't exactly know how to describe it.
He's sort of like an ascetic or something.
Yeah.
He's definitely a hermit. He lives out on this sort of mountain.
He calls himself a hermit. This guy was great. He wants all the hot gossip. They don't have any for him.
Just, you at least brought some magazines or books, right? And they're just like, well, I think Dan's like, now that you mention it, it does seem pretty rude that we didn't.
He's like, oh, well, that's okay. I have 3 words for you. Fetch your dog. And they're like, what? And then they're like, let's try get Carvanista. So they sail over to the Great Wall of China and paint, come fetch your human. Dan is here in 1904. And we get a short scene of Carvanista seeing this and going, I don't have time travel, you idiots.
Yeah. Literally right after is pretty funny.
So then on the sailboat back, this is their next scene, which we've already skipped over everything that happens between these scenes. So we've already explained everything, I mean. So the next scene is them on the boat again, and everybody's favorite character, Williamson, walks in and he's like, what's going on, or where am I? And Dan's like, I've seen you before. And Yaz is like, me too, I saw you on Atropos. And Williamson's like, you think any of that means anything to me? Do you understand what we're dealing with? And he just disappears again, and they're like, what?
Well, they somehow figure out who he is, and they track him down to the caverns of Liverpool. The mines, rather.
Dan's tour guide knowledge coming in useful here, because he goes, wait a minute, the Williamson tunnels beneath Liverpool. Some guy named Williamson dug them, and we don't even know why. And so they kind of have this theory, they're like, we have nothing left, might as well just try it, like, let's go into the tunnels and see what happens.
It turns out that's the best decision they could have made, because they go down into the tunnels, lo and behold, Williamson is there. They tell him that they're trying to stop an impending threat to the universe, and he's just like, oh my god, finally, someone understands, someone I can talk to.
This character has been the most enigmatic character the whole season. And just to watch him, he looks at Yaz completely befuddled, and then he goes, finally!
There is a level of catharsis to being confused by this character, only to realize that he has been perhaps even more confused by everything else.
There is an element of, like, you empathize with this confusion over everything that's going on, because you're right there with him.
Well, he takes them into a sort of a large room. It's still underground, still in the tunnels. And he tells them that, there are a bunch of doors. I forget how many, although I think they tell us how many. There are a bunch of doors, and they all lead to different places and times.
And then he explains that a couple days ago, everything shifted. That would line up with when the Flux happened. The doors were in Flux. Haha. And all the doors lead to different places. Now I want to put a pin in that, because what happens next happens concurrently with some other things that we haven't actually gotten to in the other plot threads yet. So let's put a pin on that. We'll come right back to it. 2017 unit, we get a scene where the Grand Serpent's like, I'm defunding unit, and Kate goes, yeah? You're really going to do that to us?
I think first there is a scene in 1987. It's not
there is
that
a scene in 1987.
important.
It's not that important.
Yeah, well, he kills a guy.
Well, he doesn't kill another guy.
And to rise up the ranks of the unit,
guy.
basically.
And we get an Osgood reference. Kate goes home, almost gets blown up. She calls Osgood and says, Osgood, I'm going dark. And then she snaps her phone in two.
Yeah, it is a flip phone, granted, but it's some pretty good strength.
Well, Kate Stewart's awesome.
Why is she using a flip phone in 2017? That's what I want to know.
For security purposes? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. That's
maybe specifically so she can do this.
I know, yeah, just break it when she needs to. Well, that's I know we've mentioned this before, but I heard the U.S. Department of Defense still uses VHS tapes to prevent. They still keep information on VHS tapes to prevent hacking and stuff like that. You can't really hack a tape.
In some ways, yeah. Yeah, it's hard to, if you have a flip phone, you don't have all these apps that people can,
install spyware
inject,
through.
Inject into your phone. No web browser, basically no access to the World Wide Web. It's basically just, telecommunications networks. So, her being essentially the head, she's directly below the Grand Serpent, Prentice, basically being the head of unit, an intelligence task force that handles aliens and deals with worldwide threats on a near daily basis. Makes sense why she would want to be secure.
Yeah, I feel like we should explain her conversation with the Grand Serpent in a little more detail. She says she knows he's an alien presence and that she knows how he's risen the ranks. She suspects he might even have time travel, which I guess is true. I mean, how else did he get to Earth? And when and the time period that he did.
Well,
So I don't know.
well,
We don't.
I don't know. We know now that we know. See, this was the thing. I also thought the Vinda and Grand Serpent plotline was in the future, but now that we know Bell is in 2021, we know Vinda is also in 2021 because they are in love, married, and Vinda worked for the Grand Serpent pre 2021.
Yeah. So who knows? Maybe they. I don't know. It's not clear. It doesn't really matter, I guess. And this is also the scene where Kate says that she will call if the Grand Serpent takes any action that she doesn't deem, right, which is basically anything other than stepping down. She's going to call in a favor from someone he really doesn't want to deal with. Implied to be the Doctor, but could be Benton Yates. Yeah. We don't know. No, I'm just kidding.
Could be Captain Jack. Imagine the team up we all never knew we wanted. Captain Jack and Kate Stewart.
Yeah, well, imagine the backlash towards that now that, all this stuff with John Barrowman has come out.
The weird thing about that is that, like, we knew about all the stuff he did on the set of Doctor Who in 2005 through 2008, and people just, like, kind of ignored it for 10 years. And then people were like, wait a minute, that kind of was, like, not cool. And some people have theorized, there is no proof of this, this is all alleged, some people have theorized that part of the reason why Christopher Eccleston left the show is not just because of his own treatment, but because, like, Julie Gardner and Russell T, remember that they were both in charge of the show, didn't take any disciplinary action towards John Barrowman except kind of pulling him aside and being like, hey, don't do that. Because I think it has been confirmed that John Barrowman, like, exposed himself on set when Christopher Eccleston was there. Like, and Eccleston was, like, not cool with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know too much about Christopher Eccleston, but he comes across as someone who takes his job and craft incredibly seriously, and John Barrowman is clearly very much the polar opposite of that from all the accounts.
But even more so than that, like, what John Barrowman did is, we should state, I believe that what John Barrowman did is wrong.
I believe I believe it's wrong. I also believe it's like a crime, right? It's like public exposure. And
yeah, it is. It is a crime. My point in saying that it was wrong is that Christopher Eccleston doesn't even need to be someone who takes his job seriously to be offended by what John Barrowman did. He just needs to be someone who, like, has half a brain cell, really. But yeah, anyway. Kind of sucks that like the only like thing that kind of sucks out of this whole situation is that there was an audio drama recorded with John Barrowman and David Tennant that, like, Big Finish was doing a good job of, like, hiding David Tennant's presence in, and David Tennant was playing the 10th Doctor, and there was, like, and this audio drama was supposed to release right when all this happened, so Big Finish kind of just buried it, and we don't even know if it'll ever be released now.
Yeah, now there's even, like, lost content from Big Finish. I guess there always was because they made their Sapphire and Steel things unavailable for so long now, but yeah. I still wish I downloaded those when they were on archive.org. What? Who said that?
The Doctor, there is one more scene with the Doctor that's actually happened a little bit before all of this. There's actually two scenes with the Doctor. One that happens a little earlier where Allsop kind of, I don't know, I guess she goes to the restroom or something. She leaves the room.
Takes a smoke break.
And the Doctor's talking with the Ood and is like, you got to help me save everyone. And the Ood's like, I can't do that. Tecteun said I can't. She's revealed at this point she's Tecteun, by the way.
Right, yeah, we skipped over that. There's let's just say that, like, the scene where she reveals that warrants more than, yeah, she revealed she was Tecteun, but whatever.
Okay, well, what do you want to say about it?
No, I said that as a joke. I mean, it's like, I think it's funny that we kind of are doing this, so let's go with it.
The Doctor's like, who are you? Like, who are you? And she's like, you don't recognize me? You don't recognize who I am?
The music swells to,
We were making a lot of jokes while this was happening. We were like, who could it be? She's Barusa.
And rapid firing off, like, every Time Lord and Time Lord adjacent character.
She's Drax.
I know, yeah, that was the funniest one. Is Dylan goes like, she's Drax. From my favorite Doctor Who story of all time, the Armageddon Factor.
But no, she's Tecteun. The Shabogan Tecteun.
I know, in hindsight, we should have kind of seen this coming. We didn't. But this, like, as far as I can tell, I'm not the biggest online presence or anything like that, but as far as I can tell, most people weren't even speculating that this was Tecteun. And that's probably because her role wasn't clearly a villainous one or even a big one until now, but still.
Also, there was no indication at all after Timeless Child that Tecteun had even survived to the modern day.
I know, yeah.
She just vanished from the story. The master was talking about it. There was also during this scene, there's a confrontation between Tecteun and the Doctor where Tecteun says, like, this is really interesting, and I'm actually glad that I did look at the internet for this because some people drew some parallels that I think are really interesting. Because when the Master is telling the Doctor this whole story, the Master is angry because he's like, everything I am is because of you to the Doctor, because he can regenerate because of the Doctor who was the Timeless Child, again, allegedly. And then in this scene, Tecteun, when she explains all the, like, genetic modifications she did to the Doctor and all the experiments she did, she's like, everything you are is because of me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Basically the exact same line between Tecteun and the Master. It's very, very interesting. And the Doctor's like, no, I'm more than that. And anyway, then Tecteun is like, yeah, really? Because I experimented on you, but guess what? You've been taking companions for years. That's basically your experiment, just like how we've been experimenting with this universe. And the Doctor goes, that's like a complete false equivalency. Like, what are you even talking about?
Yep. And then sort of the next scene that we get, that we were also kind of explaining concurrently, is that Tecteun basically almost tacitly reveals that there's sort of this pocket watch. It's sort of gold and it has Gallifreyan sort of markings on it, and it's in this like glass case, I guess. The Doctor looks at it. She goes, she's sort of, her eyes are drawn to it, and she goes, "What's this?" And Tecteun reveals that, like, the Doctor's missing memories are supposedly somehow sealed within this watch.
Yeah, well, we've seen the Time Lords burying memories in watches before, and actually this is foreshadowed because the Doctor keeps going, like, do you hear that whispering to, like, the Ood, and the Ood's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sort of it's speaking to her. Yeah, I forgot that they sealed memories in watches in previous stories. I forget which ones. Family of Blood and whatever the other one was called, I believe.
Well, that was where that idea was introduced, and then it was used again that season to reveal that the Master was alive and well in Utopia.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then it was actually really clever of Chris Chibnall to use it in Fugitive of the Jadoon to reveal the fugitive Doctor, because it put it fresh in everybody's mind that was a thing you could do.
Oh yeah, I guess I never actually made that connection between that 10th Doctor era and Fugitive of the Jadoon, huh? It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, who did the fugitive Doctor disguise herself as? What was her name? Ruth?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ruth was basically just the fugitive Doctor's version of John Smith.
Yep.
But yeah, so the Doctor's trying to get to this watch. We should also mention, don't want to skip over this, Tecteun explicitly says that they created the Flux to destroy the Doctor because the Doctor has been mucking up the universe for too long now. Lest we forget, she's been running wild since the William Hartnell incarnation for 2,000 years, saving people in the universe.
Yeah, that's interesting. I forgot about that line. I thought the Flux was something that they always used to transition to the next universe on the docket, I guess. But I guess not. I guess it's just
it
for the Doctor.
But like the Tecteun says, we introduced this universe has been done as an experiment ever since we introduced the virus into it. And she's like, what's the virus? And Tecteun's like, you're the virus. So we're using the Flux to destroy you. But then you exposed it to the time vortex, which we saw in Halloween Apocalypse. And now we've had to take you out of the universe to make sure that the universe gets destroyed.
Well, lo and behold, Azure and Swarm show up.
Yeah, Azure and Swarm show up, and they just f***ing kill Tecteun. Just no pomp and circumstance about it at all.
They do have a line. Swarm does, at least. He says, "What is he said? You
released me.
You released me.
You released me,
us,
and now I release you."
Yeah.
Now I think Tecteun knew that they were gonna kill her or try to kill her because she. I don't know. This line implies to me that she was the one who released them, but lest we forget, in Once Upon Time, Tecteun/Ossock is fully aware that Swarm and Azure are out, and even implies in that episode too that she released them because she says like the Flux is a spatial event and Swarm and Azure a temporal event that we introduced or something like that.
Yeah, it seems there's more at play here than just Tecteun saying the Doctor was like a virus in an experiment. There seems to be more happening. I don't think she predicted that Swarm and Azure were going to come back and murder her.
I don't know. She seems completely unfazed by this whole thing.
Oh, really? I wasn't necessarily paying attention to her reaction, but yeah.
Oh, well, to me, it seemed like, when they went to touch her, she just seems completely unfazed.
Yeah, if this is all part of her grand scheme or something, I'd like to see that. And in a way, we were talking about this as soon as we watched the episode, but like, in a way, I was almost like kind of glad to see her go because Azure and Swarm are far more interesting villains, I think, than Tecteun.
Well, for me, I don't think it was necessarily that. I think for me, it was like, well, we know what Tecteun's plan is now. Her role in the story is kind of done. Whereas Swarm and Azure, we still don't even know what their end goal is. I'm still trying to figure out, like, when Swarm first met the Doctor, he's like, we've been dancing for years. Now we can finally fight again. Like, how is that going to come into play in this whole thing?
Are you still trying to figure that out? I'm not. I'm just along for the ride at this point.
Well, yeah, I am too now because I can't figure it out. I'm just like, I guess I'm just Dan now.
Meanwhile, we also don't know what the Grand Serpent is even up to. He's clearly working with the Sontarans. We learn to mount some sort of attack. We don't know what his end goal is.
Yeah, like, what is his end goal? Like, I was thinking about this yesterday. It's like, what is the Grand Serpent's end goal?
I guess, look, if we knew, like, we wouldn't be on the edges of our seats here, so.
Well, yeah, let's just explain the final part of the episode, I guess, since we're right there. Yeah. The Grand Serpent contacts the Sontarans, who I straight up thought we were done with the Sontarans after War of the Sontarans, but surprise. Meanwhile, Carvanista and Bell are attacking each other and then pause because the ship is being boarded and they're like, what is that? Meanwhile, all the doors are being knocked on and opening in the Williamson tunnels. All of this turns out to be the frickin' Sontarans invading Earth as revenge for their failure in War of the Sontarans.
We didn't mention another probably Chekhov's gun-esque thing where door number 9 is like forbidden. There's sudden and severe and painful death.
Death on the other side.
On the other side of door 9.
You just have to go, well, how did you survive then, Williamson? So there has to be something on the other side of that door that's going to come back into play. It's Christopher Eccleston, 9th Doctor, door number 9. God, what a coup that would be.
Christopher Eccleston with a beard. That's why it's so dangerous.
Playing the 9th Doctor. Imagine if that door opened next episode and Christopher Eccleston stepped through. The entire fandom would lose their minds because Christopher Eccleston has been pretty emphatic about never returning to the visual TV show.
Yep. Anyway, we get the trailer for the finale of Flux, and yeah, it really does feel like a finale to Doctor Who as a whole, as we've been saying for all these weeks now. You got the Daleks, you got the Cybermen, you got the Sontarans attacking, you have Flux and Azure, you have Flux.
Flux and Azure.
I keep wanting, I've done that before, I've kept wanting to call Swarm Flux. You have the Flux, and you have Swarm and Azure, and you have the Grand Serpent all coming to a head. You've got Unit, you've got the Doctor and her companions, you have all these different factions all colliding.
Claire's coming back,
Diane, Bell, and Vinder. All the characters we've come to know and love over the past 5 weeks, including Tigme.
Thank you for including Tigme. Thank you.
Honestly, despite the fact that I maybe didn't enjoy this episode as much as the previous ones, and I think that's just down to like the allure of mystery that this episode necessarily, I think, had to do away with. Not necessarily, but just did, understandably. I still think Doctor Who Flux is maybe the second best season of Doctor Who ever made.
After
Series 11 is my favorite.
11, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I figured you were going to say. I don't even know where to place this. I'm going to wait till it's done for my final opinions on it. But it's just, we said this when we finished watching it, so, let's say it on recording because it's relevant. This is the first episode where afterwards I have no idea where this is going to go. I have, in previous episodes I had theories, I had ideas, but this episode has left me so shell-shocked, so mystified as to how this could possibly wrap up that I don't even have any theories left. I'm just so overwhelmed.
I know, it's like, how are they have 50 minutes to resolve this unless they cliffhang it into the specials, unless they do that. Assuming they don't, they have 50 minutes to resolve it.
And that was something that actually, coming into this recording, I wanted to ask you, and I wanted to talk about briefly, like, how much do you think they will resolve next week? Do you think they will actually resolve every single plot thread, or do you think there's going to be some holdovers that are going to hang around through the specials?
I would be incredibly surprised if everything was wrapped up. There's definitely going to be at least some that goes over into the specials.
I think I have to agree. I think I have to agree. There's got to be something that's going to hold over into the specials. We forgot to mention that Unit's been hanging onto the Doctor's TARDIS for, I guess, 60 years. In the 1967 scene, we see the 13th Doctor's TARDIS bumming around in the room that the Grand Serpent kills the guy in. And he just says something like, oh, yeah, and you can tell it's the 13th Doctor's because he says we found it in a village in Devon, which is where they were in Village of the Angels.
Yep. All this reminds me, I'm not sure if I've told this story on the podcast before, but whatever, if I have, I'll tell it again. All this reminds me of when I was a kid and I used to read the Aragon book series, which was always billed as a trilogy. It was like, Aragon came out, and then I think the second one was called Eldest. I don't remember what the other two were called, but it was always billed as a trilogy. There's going to be 3 in total, and, I was reading the third one, pretty excited, I like the series and all that. And I was like maybe 15 pages away from the end. And I was like, this doesn't really seem like it's wrapping up. How are they going to resolve everything in the final 15 pages that I have left here? I read the rest of this. I turn to the final page, and it's like, check out the exciting conclusion in our 4th book, whatever the 4th one was called. I don't even know or care to know. And, even this is when I was like 11, 12 maybe. I was like, you know what? Screw this. I'm not reading that 4th book. And I closed the book, and, to this day, I don't know how it ends. I never read the 4th one.
Spite is a powerful motivator, I guess.
But I'm almost getting sort of the same sensations. It's like, we were promised a season, not a season with extended into specials. I'm done with Doctor Who if they do that. Not really.
No, you're not.
No, I'm not.
No, you're not.
No, and I'm not even mad about it whatsoever.
Someone on Twitter was like, man, it's such a power play by Chris Chibnall to take the shortest season of Doctor Who and instead pull an Uno reverse card and turn it into the longest single story in Doctor Who history.
Yeah, and it's honestly like, oh, we only have 6 episodes. Well, look how much more we can cram into 6 than we've ever done in 13.
Wow, I'm just looking at the wiki and they made a War Machines reference in this episode? What?
Really? Where does that fit?
Apparently in the 1958 scene, or in the 1967 one, someone says that Unit was embarrassed to have missed the invasion of the War Machines.
Huh.
Which I guess would be the 1967 scene, because the War Machines took place in 1966.
I'm not even seeing that on the wiki. I'm on the page. Where are you getting this from?
It's under continuity.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Under continuity, second bullet point. Yeah, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, we're like, what, 5 days away from knowing how this all ends? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for us, 4 for, at this point, when it's actually going to come out. So I've done a pretty good job unintentionally remaining unspoiled, even though I tried to spoil myself, but I think I'll this time I'll at least try to stay away from spoilers.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited to see how this is going to end. I'm really. This is probably the most excited I've been to watch an episode of Doctor Who in years.
I think it's probably the most excited I've been ever. Granted, I'm not someone who like really shows excitement, but but whatever.
It's just very, very exciting to know, and I'm really excited to see how this timeless child stuff is going to happen. How is the Doctor going to save the universe? Is the fugitive Doctor going to come back? We're going to see Joe Martin again. Like
that's the thing. You ask like, what are they going to resolve? What are they not going to? And it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if they revolve. Oh my god, I can't even speak anymore. Wouldn't be surprised if they resolve the Flux and Azure and Swarm and all of this, but then somehow teased the fugitive Doctor and the Master and the Timeless Child more information about that kind of stuff going into the specials. That's what the specials are about. Would not be surprised if that was the case.
Yeah, that is pretty much exactly what I was going to say. I completely believe that is what is going to happen on the next episode. 100%.
Yep. But if there's anything these past 5 weeks have told us, it's that, maybe we should be expecting the unexpected. And by that token, not expecting the expected. So, who knows?
So much of this season is like, what did you think was going to happen? Well, it's not going to be that. It's, really admire the very first episode, the Flux they could have set it up as like the first episode. For the second episode, the Flux hasn't happened yet. The Doctor's trying to figure out what it is. But instead, right out the gate, 30 minutes into episode 1, the Flux is wiping out most of the universe.
Yeah, it's towards the end. Yeah, it's like 45, yeah.
Like, how do you come back from that? Most of the universe doesn't exist anymore. I guess, so the last thing I really have to say about this, the Doctor does give two things. The Doctor gives a kind of speech to Tecteun, to Swarm, to Azure, where she's like, I'm going to break out of here, I'm going to save the universe and the Flux, and I'm going to figure out what's going on with this timeless child thing. And before that, the Doctor does give, I think, kind of a hint to how this thing is all going to be resolved. She describes the Flux as a compression, that the whole universe has been compressed down to a small space. Everything that is destroyed exists but has been compressed. And she says, that what has been compressed can be uncompressed. Or
she's going to initiate like some sort of Big Bang event.
Yeah. It was while we were watching this, it's like, how does this like reconcile with the Big Bang? And just like, it doesn't. But anyway,
maybe the Big Bang was like some sort of version of the Flux or something like that. Actually,
that's possible.
You know what? This is a total non sequitur, but like I just thought of it. If what Azure and Swarm are doing is all according to Tecteun's plan, what if like her master like scheme and all of this, not master isn't like the master, but like what if her overall scheme and all of this was like to like prove the Doctor's ideology is aligned with her own, like by getting the Doctor to kind of intervene and stop all of this, following her own sense of morals. Because she should basically just be proving Tecteun right about her and in the right herself.
But by setting up a situation for the Doctor to solve.
Yeah, exactly.
And forcing the Doctor to have to solve it. It's like one of those things where like the winning move is to play, but then everyone's going to die.
Yep, exactly.
Wow. Damn
Tecteun. Back at it again with the evil plans.
The thing is, like, the Chibnall era has been so tight-lipped about who's appearing in what episode, and that we can't even confirm whether or not like Ossock's even going to be in the next episode. Like we didn't even know Kate was going to be in this season at all until last week.
Yeah, and we had no idea. Like we knew this. Something even more impressive in a way is like we knew the Sontarans were going to be in this season, but we didn't know Like I thought, and I would assume most people thought they were just done after War of the Sontarans.
Yeah, I assumed that.
Turns out, no, they're the main kind of thing.
Cannot wait to see how this resolves. Cannot wait. And when this goes out, it'll be like just a couple hours till the resolution comes out.
Yeah, it will be a couple hours. Yeah, 9 a.m. on Sunday, Pacific time. That is. Well, there were really no. We did our sort of classic Who references throughout the episode, so I don't think we need to detail any of that. But like we also don't need to detail here are any actors because there weren't really any new major characters for once. For once, finally, thank you. An episode
thinking about this before
5.
we recorded. So I guess, given all that, we can respond to some comments. I've got an email from Steven. I think I saw that he actually responded to your tweet while we were recording this episode.
And actually, Justin Mitchell, who we read sort of response from the beginning, it was right before we started recording, responded to one of my comments as well, so we can read that as well.
Yeah, all right, so I'll start with Steven's email.
Yeah.
Survivors of the Flu.
Oh my god.
Hey guys. At last we have come to an episode that I actually thought was really good as I was watching it. I will admit that when you take a step back to think it over, it doesn't all make complete sense. Like the Division didn't want the Doctor mucking things up and now Tech Taeyoon is trying to get her to join. Like what? But touching upon what was revealed in the Timeless Children again was very satisfying to see. I feel like the Doctor is made even more mysterious by this idea that we don't even know if she came through the wormhole. I didn't expect everything to be answered, and I don't think the Doctor's origins will ever be fully detailed, so I was fine with how things went down, but I'm sure there'll be a bunch of people annoyed about the lack of concrete details. I want to pause reading the email because we did actually kind of not explain that, and I wanted to just include this here for some people who don't remember. The Doctor, when Tech Taeyoon is like, I found you and I experimented on you, you had come through the wormhole, like the Master had said, the Doctor points out correctly that like Tech Taeyoon had no idea why she was there as a child. She could have come through the wormhole. She could be waiting to go through the wormhole. Her parents might have been stolen by the wormhole, and maybe she was from this side all along. Like, we don't actually know if she came from the wormhole or not. And that's important because Tech Taeyoon tries to convince the Doctor to join her because she thinks that the universe they're going to is the other end of the wormhole that she found the Timeless Child by.
Right, so basically Tech Taeyoon tries to use that as leverage to get the Doctor to join her, and that's when the Doctor, just to kind of make the order of operations here clear, that's when the Doctor comes back and says, well, like, based on the story you told me, like, we really have no idea who I am.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, if I remember correctly, Tech Taeyoon's response to this is basically just like a shrug and an evil laugh or something like that.
Yeah, the Doctor's response there is actually, again, reinforcing what we've said multiple times. You know, people are like, well, this idea that there were other Doctors really undercuts the Doctor. And like, but no, like in The Timeless Child, when she meets with the fugitive Doctor and the Doctor's like, you know, the fugitive Doctor says to the 13th Doctor, like, when have you ever been defined by who you were before? Like this Doctor, in this episode, she herself now has internalized that belief. That's what we call character development. And is now saying, like, you don't even know who I was. And I've never been defined by who I was before. And like what I was then isn't what I am now.
Right. Something, I guess, just before we get back to the email, something we also didn't play up as much as maybe the episode kind of did through, you know, its visual storytelling is that, like, there's definitely going to be some dilemma where the Doctor has to choose between opening that watch and getting her memories back, or like, you know, saving someone, or just not doing that. And it's pretty clear that she's just not going to do it.
Yeah. I firmly believe character development wise, she will not open.
Yeah,
that watch.
there's no. I will. Should we do we'll start cooking with Trust Your Doctor thing if she opens the watch? I mean, she's not going to open the watch, so I feel like we can do it. You could say it.
I don't know. In the preview, it seemed like Swarm and Azure opened the watch. So like, we're gonna have to like set some ground rules on whether or not someone else opening the watch counts or not.
Yeah, we won't do a cooking with Trust Your Doctor bet over the watch, but it's pretty clear she's not going to do it. Imagine if like they open the watch
Right.
and it's a laugh track, like that's what it does. That's what the watch activates. It's like a laugh track.
They open the watch and it's empty. That almost be even better as if Swarm and Azure open the watch to find out what's going on and it's just empty. There's nothing there.
It reminds me of this book I read as a kid. It was about this like kid whose father dies and he leaves like this game for him to play where he has to find all these clues and like find a hidden treasure. And like when he opens the treasure at the end, it's just rocks.
The real treasure was the friends we made along the
Exactly. It's that in book form. That was the gist of the book. I believe the rocks were like important to the father in some way. I can't remember. I don't even know what this book is called. I'll try to find it for the show notes. It'll be a real throwback.
Well, let's get back to the email, I guess.
Yeah, sorry.
When there was a mention of the multiverse, I could not help but think about your guys' talk about the Doctor possibly falling into an alternate universe. I kind of wondered whether the show might be going the way of on-screen live-action Marvel and DC, which in the last few years have been leaning more and more into the multiverse angle. It's kind of surprising that a show like Doctor Who has not taken much advantage of this, whereas Star Trek has done it quite a lot. The flashbacks involving UNIT were pretty cool. However, they complicate the UNIT dating controversy even further. I'll link a Radio Times article that breaks it down, and I'll put this in the show notes for everyone at home. All that being said, the acting for Kate Stewart was top-notch. I'm glad UNIT is no longer just an afterthought in the Chibi era, what with that joke of an explanation that it got dissolved because of budget reasons. Here's a question I have about the podcast. If Flux had aired at a time when you guys weren't caught up on Doctor Who and you ended up watching it much later, a while after it had all aired, would you still have committed one episode per Flux episode? Would you have talked about the whole season in one episode like you did with the old serials? Would you have divided discussion of the season into 2 or 3 episodes? Probably doesn't matter since this isn't what happened, but was kind of curious, cautiously optimistic to see how the season wraps up. Cheers, Steven. I was thinking about this. We probably still would have split it up one episode per, just because it would have been so much content to do as one episode. And we split Trial of a Time Lord up. We split it up per each of the 4. We split it up into each of the 4 constituent serials instead of considering Trial of a Time Lord as one story. And I think that's the most direct analog I can draw here.
Yeah, I mean, I sure hope we wouldn't have watched it all in one go in this alternate universe where that happened.
I mean, we even split up. Was it the War Games?
No, we didn't split up the War Games.
I think it was the Invasion. The Invasion, which was 12 episode serial, we split that into 2. If I remember correctly.
Wasn't there? There was something breaking that up, right? Wasn't it? I don't remember.
I don't remember. I just know that the 12 episode serial we did split up into 2. So there is precedent on Trust Your Doctor for that, and we probably would have split it up one episode per one episode.
Yeah. And even if it wasn't precedent, like we're a 2-person team, like we can just make the decisions very easily. But yeah.
Yeah, and also the justification for the split would have been exactly what you just said. We're a 2-person team.
But yeah, thanks.
So yeah, that's all we have for emails.
Yeah.
Thanks for reaching out, Stephen.
Well, like I said before, Justin Mitchell responded. It was either right when we started recording or right before we started. But basically, I just said like, wow, we're your number 1 podcast on your Spotify Wrapped. Thanks, glad you're enjoying the podcast, that kind of thing. So Justin wrote back, no problem. It's a great listen. I was caught up a while back, fell off, but I started listening again earlier this year. Been fun catching up again. Really easy to binge listen. Yeah, cool. Thanks again, Justin. Really,
yeah, thank you for listening.
Glad to hear that we're easy to binge listen. That's interesting in a good way.
Well, I think we have a very easy listening style.
We're of a mellifluous tone. I think.
Nice word.
I guess.
Well, when I'm like listening to edit, I find it very easy to kind of just listen to it and just kind of kick back and just go through it. And I can very easily see how you could just put it on in the background and kind of just binge listen and like 3 parts later you're like, what? So yeah, I do listen to the whole episode every week to edit it in case people for some reason thought I didn't. I don't know why you would think I wouldn't.
I do as well for a far less important purpose, which is to do the show notes, which Dylan now, as we mentioned before, already does beforehand. I just clean them up and add anything that he didn't get.
Well, I think us both doing the show notes has made them better than they ever were, in my opinion.
It's also made them more confusing because we both write in the first person without making any distinction between ourselves. So, like, you'll get ones from Dylan where he calls himself I, and then, like, the next show note perhaps will be me writing it, and I'll also just say I, and I won't make any distinction that it's me.
I think that's fully in line with the show, though. I think that's very much in line with the podcast itself.
Sure.
There's a show note a couple weeks ago where all I wrote was, wow, my accent was really strong on this line for some reason. And I'm just imagining someone sitting there going, was this Dylan or Keon who wrote this?
Probably Dylan, since...
I guess I have.
I was going to say I don't have an accent because everyone has an accent, but I don't have an accent that is foreign to the place where I live.
Yeah, but perhaps foreign to where most of our listeners are from, which I think I'm still... I think most of our listeners are in the UK or Australia. Probably because basically every single person we've ever had on the show as a guest, except for RG and Steven, were from those countries and had podcasts in those countries and had a fan base established in those countries.
RG's from Australia.
RG's from Australia, yeah. Basically, everyone we've had on the show except for Steven has had, well, Sergeant Drano, actually, too, has had an established fan base in either the UK or Australia, so...
Yeah, plus those are just the two places where Doctor Who is the biggest.
Yep.
I always have to remind myself that Doctor Who is probably bigger in Australia than it is in the UK.
Whenever I tell people I'm going like on Mondays, because we watch on Mondays, I'm like, I'm going home to watch Doctor Who, and they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to watch home and watch Doctor Who.
Oh, I can't say I relate because, again, I don't talk to anyone.
Yeah, except for me, I guess.
Yeah. Let me clarify. I do talk, like, I do converse, just not through voice, just through text only.
I'm the last vestige of your vocal. I'm the last thing linking your vocal cords to the world at large.
To use, to not atrophying.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's everything. Did we have any other social media comments to respond to?
No, I don't think so. No.
I think I saw earlier that Steven just responded to your tweet saying that you didn't like this episode as much as the others, but you're still excited to see how it ends. And Steven just responded reiterating what he said in the email, that this was his favorite episode so far.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're doing my job better than I ever did. So yeah, you're right. He did say that. So yeah.
Well, thanks to everybody for reaching out. Glad everybody's enjoying the show. And I guess on the Wrapped, bringing this back to the beginning, thanks to everybody who listened in 2021. And here's to another good year. Our 8-year anniversary is coming up very soon, believe it or not.
Yeah, crazy to think that we've been doing this for almost 8 years already.
Damn. Well, if you would like to email us, you could reach us at thedoctor@decadavevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Flux, the whole season. We're coming to a head, coming to the end. And next week we'll let you know what we're doing next. You can find us on YouTube at Decadative Vegetable. You can find us Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, anywhere. Basically, you can find the podcast, whether we put it there or not, at Trust Your Doctor, a Doctor Who podcast. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
That's a reference, by the way, to renegade podcast sites that just upload podcasts. Those exist. There's our podcast, and any podcast that is officially out there, put out there by people, has been uploaded to other sites that they are not have not given their explicit allowance of.
Speaking of the word renegade and podcast in the same sentence, I think our one sentence site description on basically any search engine is still "We're renegade podcast lords." So we made that 8 years ago.
Anyway, check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor, like us on Facebook, check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast, and follow us on Twitter. And next time we're finishing up Series 13, finishing up Doctor Who Flux with the Vanquishers. But until then, the end.